So I should explain to the assembled audience here that because Dr. Holt is from the outside of the district, one of the things that we always do for a candidate who's not a part of the district, as Mr. Albrecht is we ask them to come and spend a day in the district visiting schools, interacting with staff, and so on. And that's not something that we asked Mr. Albrecht to do because he's here, okay? So this is what we did for Dr. Holt. So the first question to her is going to be, you had an opportunity, I think you came maybe yesterday or something, so you had an opportunity to spend the day in the district, and Kelly Bowles chauffeured her around, as she's done in the past with great elan. So tell us about your day in the district. What did you see? What did you observe? What did you learn?
Okay, it was absolutely amazing. It was absolutely amazing. So I had the opportunity to visit 6 of our schools, and we started out at Wayne Memorial High School, and just being able to start walking through math classes where at every school, I'll speak in totality, I won't go through each school, but at every school I saw teachers building relationships with kids. I saw people that wanted to be here. I saw a PE teacher who I asked him, why do you still do what you do? Why do you do this? And he got misty-eyed talking about how much he loved what he does here in Wayne Westland. And that was a theme throughout, and it's part of why I want to come here, is just the fact that I can tell that people love our babies here. I can teach a whole lot. I was a great teacher, still am, but I can't teach anyone to love my babies. I can't teach anyone to love them when they're, doing things that, we oftentimes cannot fathom. And what I saw here is a genuine love for children. I saw that we have many programs. We have PBIS. We have The Leader in Me. We have many climate and culture and socio-emotional programs across the district that I can tell that our schools are really focused on getting to know our children, getting to know our families, because we know that without a significant relationship, no learning happens. And so to see that today, it brought so much joy to my heart. Ms. Bull was an amazing host and a wealth of information who, we talked a little bit about the strategic plan and what we're doing, and just further insight into why this is a critical place for me. One thing that really kind of brought it home for me was just seeing the way the principals talked about their teachers and their kids. The light in their eye, I can't even describe it. I really can't. It made me feel at home. The kids were just so sweet and so kind. I saw teachers consoling children who were having, it was second day of school, so for some kids at different levels, especially for some of our younger kids, they were going over rules and expectations, and there may have been some moments where kids were just a little emotional about what was going on. It was already in the full swing. I saw teachers putting their arms around children, saying, it's okay, we're going to make it through this. Come with me. I saw reflection rooms, which I hadn't, in escape rooms, which is a concept that for some people is very, very far beyond our time. And to see that we understand not just the academic piece, but we understand that we have to care about kids. And so for me, that was huge. What I learned today was just solidified why I want to come, and the great work that is possible here, that it's work that I know I'm capable of doing. If it wasn't something that was a fit, I wouldn't be here. I also was able to see parts of the community, because when you're driving and you don't know where you are, you don't know kind of what's happening. And so Ms. Ball was able to explain to me, different attendance areas for the various schools in real time. And that helped me see some of the challenges some of our families have, and get a clear picture and a historical picture of why those challenges exist, and started to kind of feed my brain about what we can do about it and how we can work together to improve schools. So overall, I was telling my husband earlier on the phone, today was probably one of the best days of my career. Regardless if I get the position or not, it was wonderful to be in the schools.
Okay. So if you were to be selected superintendent at Wayne Westland Community Schools, the board would be interested in knowing what you might be about in your first 90 days as a superintendent. So share your thinking with them now.
pull this up on the computer. I wasn't sure what the format was going to be, but up there, sometimes it's a little hard to see. So the first part you see up there, I put the district mission because the district mission has been really guiding my thinking around everything that I've been reading. The mission is what we said we were going to do. We said we were going to prepare and educate all students to be knowledgeable, responsible, contributing members of society. So in everything that I'm looking at, I'm looking to see how well are we preparing and educating all students to be responsible, knowledgeable, and contributing members of a global society. So I've organized it into 5 goals with initial entry actions to each goal. And so as we look at the first goal, which is to assess progress on how well we are educating and preparing students to be knowledgeable, responsible, and contributing members of a global society, I'm talking about what our district mission is saying, and I want to ensure that we're actually doing that. And so the first thing I wanted to contribute in order to do that is a comprehensive review of the quantitative and complete the quantitative, because right now I can only look at what's on the internet. Once I get in the position, I'll be able to see some of the embargo data, some of the data that is not always accessible to the public in a timely fashion. I'll also be able to do a qualitative assessment of what it is that our teachers, our community members, our faculty, our staff think about what's going on and how it is we've gotten to this place. I really want to gather the story, because behind the story, I feel like the solutions are in the story somewhere. This wasn't just when you look at the data, it can paint a certain picture, but there is a narrative behind that picture. There are people behind that narrative, and I want to get to know who are the people and what are the critical components of that narrative. The other thing I want to do is analyze patterns in student achievement data and evaluate the current state of teaching and learning. This I can't do just from an office alone. I have to get out to the school sites along with our executive cabinet and our departmental leaders to, again, paint that picture of how we were able to come to this place. How well are we doing the work that we set out to do? And finally, I wanted to take a look at how we're using our benchmark data. We have the NWA MAPS assessments are currently embedded into our schools. I want to see how we're using that to assess progress over time, how we're using that to evaluate our instructional practices, how we're using that to inform our instructional decisions, how we're using that with families to ensure that they understand what, I was talking at one of the school sites today about the ACT to MAPS comparison. And so there's a lot of tools and curricula available through NWA MAPS that can begin to tell the story over time. How well are we using what we already have? And that's just one example, is the benchmark assessment data, but as we move through, I want to see how well we're using our climate and culture tools. How well are we using our social emotional tools that we already have in place to be able to move the dial on student achievement and assess our effectiveness. So what else was I going to? I also want to establish a protocol of how we're going to look at this work. Oftentimes, knowing that the superintendent is coming and looking at data and talking to people can make some folks feel uncomfortable. At the same time, while I'm trying to build relationships, I also need to assess our current progress. So I want to be very transparent about the process that we're going to use to evaluate the instructional program and how well we're meeting the needs that we set out in our mission. Secondly, is to build trusting and positive collaborative relationships with each and every one of you. While this process has allowed me to review the district, it's allowed me to see people inside the district, it's allowed me to shake hands with staff members and faculty at all levels of the organization, what it has not allowed me to do is to get to know you, Miss Sally. It hasn't allowed me to get to know, and I want to get to know each of you, because that's going to be critical for our relationship, is to get to know one another. And so in order to build trusting and efficient governance procedures, we have to know one another. More importantly, you have to know me, since most of the time you already know each other. And I want to, kind of bridge that gap with each and every one of you. So in order to do that, some initial actions are to set up either one-on-one, two-on-one, or three-on-one, just to make sure we're not breaking any Brown Act meetings, for us to get to know one another. And I want to hear each and every one of your stories, because there's a story as to why you're sitting in this seat right here. It wasn't just, I woke up one day and I decided I wanted to be a board member. That's not something that people typically do. So why is it that we're up here? Why is it that, what is it that drove you to come from wherever, there are various backgrounds across the table, to where you are now, and what is it that you see are some of the important issues that we need to address. And I have a feeling I'll get some similarities, but there are very distinct interests from each and every one of you, and I want to hear and know a little bit more about that. I would like us to set up a workshop to both get feedback on the 90-day plan that I'm presenting to you now, and also to review the current status on priorities from our strategic plan, because there's a lot in here, and in order to know where it is that we want to move most strategically and how we need to operate from our perspective politically in order to garner some support for the financial means that are going to be required to see this plan to fruition. As I started to look at this a little bit more deeply in the last week, I started to start counting up the dollars and looking at our budget in comparison to what we have planned here. We have a beautiful vision and some great actions and goals, but we're going to need to think very strategically about how we're going to fund these for our community. And so I want to have either a retreat or a workshop for us to have some conversations about that, and then just to talk about in general how we're going to operate with communication protocols, roles, and responsibilities, and things of that nature. And also to get your expectations from me for the first year of our work together. I want to know what is it that you would like to see. And what is the other one? And also one of the things that I've noted across here is that we're looking at our facilities plan and doing some facilities planning with our community. I would love to get an opportunity with us as a team to really talk about what do you see that process looking like? What are some of the challenges and the areas of opportunity that you see available as we start to go out to our community and begin the process of sharing our facilities plan and the funding that we need in order to see this plan through to fruition. So that's in the first 90 days, I would really like for us to get really well established and have a great working relationship from the start. Also, to understand how we're going to handle conflict. We don't want to start discussing how we're going to handle conflict when the conflict arises. It's natural. We're human beings. There's going to be conflict in every arena. So we want to talk now about what are going to be our norms and protocols as a team in order to handle when that happens. Goal number 3 is to establish and maintain stakeholder trust through open, honest, and transparent two-way communication. This became a goal after my conversation with Dr. Harmala, because as I spoke with her and knowing the hard work it takes to build trust in an organization and to come from where she came in the last 3 years, there's no way, we cannot lose that momentum and that trust that has been gained within our organization. And I realize I am the X factor. I'm the person that people do not know. And so in order to establish effective two-way communication with our community and with our stakeholders, our teachers, our unions, et cetera, I have 3 action items here. One is to listen to and learn from our stakeholders regarding our priorities for the district by meeting with all the stakeholders, board members, administrators, site leaders, teachers, the presidents of all of our bargaining units, so that we can just start figuring out what is our conversation going to be, what is our relationship going to be like, who are you, get to know their stories. As you can tell, I believe that there's power in the relationships that are built on stories, and I'm someone that I want to know. Once I know your story and you know mine, then we can start to figure out where we come from and how we relate to one another. And so that's not just true for us as a board, it's also true for the members of our community. I also want to identify key stakeholders that I will need to connect with in order to help facilitate the transition to this process. Who is it that's already trusted? Who is it that was part of that process that Dr. Harmala went through to build such great communication and relationships that have enabled us to get to this plan, and connect with those individuals to glean from them what are the best strategies to use as we move forward. So assessing the current state of collaboration and engagement at all levels of the organization. So that, what I mean by that is, how well do we all work together as a team? It's one thing for us to trust one another. It's a complete other for us to be effective as a team in meeting the expectations of our mission. And so I want to truly assess how well we collaborate interdepartmentally, within departments, within cabinet. So we need to, I need to assess that through conversations and through just continuing with the same operating procedures that we have now. My goal in coming in, especially even though it's the beginning of the year, in the minds of most, it's still mid-year. Once school starts, it's considered mid-year. And so I need to be able to continue with the current processes that Dr. Harmala and the current team have already put into place, moving that forward while building those relationships. Finally, deterring current perspectives in the school system. What I have learned in, looking around, looking for homes and home hunting and just talking to people in the community is that there's a very mixed bag of emotions when you mention the school district out in the community. I get everything from, it's amazing, I love it, my kids have never had a problem, to I send my kids elsewhere, I'm never sending, anyone there. And so, I just listen to all of it. But what I try to get to is the why, the story behind. Why is it that, your kids had a great experience and, the child next door may not have? What were some of the mitigating factors? And learning that will help me and the team be able to make some better decisions on how we move forward strategically. And it'll also help people get to know who I am. So the goal of all of this is to, one, build the relationships, have people get to know me get to know them. Another piece that I believe is in this one is I would like to hold some community forums out in the community, not just have people come here to me, but I want to go and visit the local churches. I want to go visit the local community centers. I want to go and meet with our mayors or incoming mayors, depending on what happens in the upcoming election, and find out what is the relationship between what we have going on here and the city plans that are going on in Wayne and Westland and Inkster. What I've noticed is that a lot of our work, we're going off of our projections that we have based on the current reality. And I wonder, and I'll find out more through conversations, how much we have incorporated the growth that's happening in Detroit, the growth that's happening at the airport, the growth that's going to happen in Wayne as the train or railway system goes from Ann Arbor to Detroit, which is supposed to happen, I believe, in the next 6-7 years is what the plans say, but we shall see what reality is. How do our elected officials see the school district in that work? And how can we partner to make sure that we can bring more families here to Wayne Westland? The next piece is to review, learn, and continue the work of the strategic plan. And so I recognize that, and I said this in my last interview, that the work in the strategic plan, I think this is one of the best plans I've ever seen, mainly because of how it came to be. I understand that having over 200 participants may not seem like a lot, but after talking with Dr. Harmala and looking at where we came from, this is a huge accomplishment, and we have to be able to build on it. The plan does not have time to wait for Shelley Holt to get acclimated to the district. The plan has to continue, and Shelley Holt needs to figure out how to work within it. And the best way I can do that is to build relationships with the team that created it. So I would like to meet with those people that were integral in creating this, the department leads, to find out where they currently are on the 2016, 2017 action items, what happened, how did we assess them, how well did we do. Also looking at what our current progress is on the 2017-18 and our preparation for 18-19 and 19-20. And so that's going to call for us to have some conversations together around where each person or where each department lies with that work. So good thing I know what this says because I can barely see it. Meet with various members of the planning team, meet with the departmental leads, and I did talk about the other piece is to explore the relationship. I spoke about this in the last interview as well. The relationship between our current site plans and this strategic plan. And I got some great advice from Dr. Harmala when I spoke about this and how to think about this. But the biggest thing is going to be to hone in what we're doing at the sites and be really, really good at one or two focus areas. And some of our sites have already begun that work. Others are still, trying to do everything. And typically when we try to do everything, we end up doing not too much very well. And so really trying to hone in light of the strategic plan, what's happening with the site plans along with the principals and their supervisors. So I just want to have some conversations around where are we, how are we progressing, and what's the next step in that conversation of honing in what we're doing, and what can the most important piece to that is what it is that I and our executive cabinet and district and central office team can do to support. So if they decide they're going to go on whatever those one or two items are, I typically don't, when I'm working with site level or building administrators, they know their sites much better than I do. My thing is just to make sure that it's very focused so that we know exactly what, if it's Wayne Memorial High School, we know Wayne Memorial is working on climate and culture, building relationships, and, maybe strategic use of benchmark assessment. So they're honing in. That's it. We're not going to do everything under the sun. We're just going to do very little. Then everyone in central office needs to know Wayne Memorial is focusing on 1, 2, and 3, and what does the support plan look like for each and every one of those schools? That's something we can get done in the next 90 days, is to look at how are we centrally supporting each school with their particular priorities. Then over time, we can talk about shifting the plans to really mirroring what it is that we have here, and our plan really mirroring what we have at the state level with their 20-year plan. Finally, I mentioned meeting with the local, state, and government officials, because while I understand that what we're doing in the strategic plan, what I don't understand from a state level is why our funding does not match or equitably, why is funding not equitably distributed to this very needy district? I don't understand that. And I've looked at the formula, I can't tell you how many times, and I've asked some of the best business experts that I know. And so I want to talk to people about why is it that Wayne Westland is not getting the adequate, equitable funding that we're getting. And I have no problem asking, and then we can formulate our plan around what those answers are. Well, I won't go too far into it, but I just can't quite understand why we're so underfunded from the state level.
Probably noticed they're all smiling.
Well,
There's a story here, but we don't have to go into it now.
okay, well, I'm welcome to hear the story behind that, but regardless of the story, I want to know what I can do as superintendent to advocate for that funding, and what it is that we need to do in order to ensure that our babies are getting exactly what other babies in other districts are getting. And so I'll leave that there, but that's something that's really puzzling me. And as an equity, I consider myself an equity leader. That's something that actually keeps me up at night. I want to know why. Once we know the why, we can then formulate the strategy as to how we're going to combat it and get some of those funding formulas changed if necessary. Also meet with, I talked about this, meet with personnel to discuss the financial reality within the strategic plan and how actions will be prioritized, and how to approach the state with meeting our needs. I just talked about that. Finally, my fifth area is to understand how we learn and our priorities for each educational site to ensure high performance and support from all levels of the organization. How we learn as a community is going to mirror our results with children. If we are a community of learners at our level, at the site level, at the central office level, we have to figure out how do we learn best together. When we don't understand something, what do? As a teacher, if I don't get it, what do I do? Where are my resources? So I want to understand as an organization and as a community, how do we learn? Once I can understand how we learn, then we can understand how best to teach. I go back, everything I do tends to go back to my days as a teacher. What's the first thing we did as teachers? We built relationships and we did diagnostics. I want to know who you are and I want to know what you already know. Very similarly, as superintendent, I want to know who we are and I want to know how we all learn together. Once I know how we learn together, then we can look at how our professional development and our capacity for meeting the training needs of principals, teachers, and central office staff determine the degree at which it's job embedded. So I want to know how much of our training and our professional development for leaders at all levels of the organization is job embedded. How much of it do we need to pull people out for? How much of it is, quite honestly, and this is just speaking, not anything from Wayne Westland, but oftentimes you'll see, oh, we have this professional development, and then we have this one over here. Then we have, and then we got one, somebody found one. And so they tend to come, people are very trained, but they're not always the greatest at practitioner or implementation. So I want to know how much of our training is actually going from the actual training point to at the practitioner level and seeing results in the classroom. And so assessing how well our professional development has been working. I also already talked about identifying key staff to help with the transition. I am not a one-woman show. This is probably the most I'll ever talk from this position, but I like to learn and glean from other people. So I need to know what everyone else knows, and then together we can come up with how decisions are going to be made. Hold one-on-one meetings with the leaders of each bargaining unit to establish relationships and assess needs. And I didn't put them in any particular order. It was interesting. I will admit, when I don't know, I was looking for, as I was looking at all those bargaining unit agreements, and thank goodness Ms. Ball today reminded me. I looked at them, I was like, there's no way they have that many unions. There's no way. Like, I don't, maybe they put all the pages of all the union documents on different documents. But actually, I learned today we do have that many. So just meeting with Ms. Ball and the representatives from the various unions to establish that relationship and build the trust so that, again, when problems arise, we know how to handle them. And when they have questions or concerns or challenges or requests, they know that they can come to me or Ms. Ball or anybody in our team. So one thing I always do is request briefing papers from each department. So I want to understand what each department is currently working on, what are their areas of priorities, and what decisions need to be made now, what decisions need to be made in 1 month, what decisions need to be made in 3 months, and what decisions need to be made in 6 months. This is a very strategic approach because I want to move forward with what we're already doing, but I don't want to have decision-making keep us from moving forward. So if I know ahead of time what are the decisions that need to be made, then we as cabinet can collaborate. They can educate me. I can weigh in, and we can make sure that those timelines are met and nothing is kind of left to the wayside or it's not felt at the site as not being seamless with my transition here. The other piece is I would like to meet with each principal and their direct supervisor like I mentioned, assess their site goals. I put that in both places, and what needed supports they have, and determine how communication and decision-making will happen within us as an executive team. So I want to meet with each of my direct reports with their resumes and their briefs on what they're working on to assess how we're going to work together as an executive team and what are the projects that each of them are working on. So establishing those protocols and, again, moving in seamless with what Dr. Harmala has already begun, and at times seeing what's worked, what's not worked. So SWOT analysis, where the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is something I tend to use quite a bit, just to be able to get everyone's voice in and see. Oftentimes it's not easy to tell the superintendent or the boss, I don't quite like that. Well, this will be everyone's opportunity to kind of hit the reset button a bit and say, okay, these are the practices I really enjoyed and that we need to keep, and these are the ones that didn't quite work so well, and we might need to adjust or shift to meet our needs. I talked about the collaboration between departments and decision-making. Oh, the other thing is I wanted to look at how our current accountability measures in data, both achievement data and other types of data, how do we currently hold ourselves accountable and how to assess those results over time. And so I have various spreadsheets that I use when I collect the data because I have to put it in my brain a certain way. Sometimes the reports come in a way that works for me. I don't mind doing that work, but when I get there, I want to know, how does everyone else do that? How do we currently look at our benchmark data? Is there a way that we centrally look at the MAPS data in fall, winter, and spring and provide support strategically to school sites based on the number of kids that scored in certain areas? There should be some kind of trigger that says, oh, okay, well, if I notice in 5 out of the 11 elementary schools that students are not performing in this particular standard, then maybe I can come up with some kind of resource for teachers in that particular standard to assist them. So I want to know how we centrally look at our data, assess what supports are needed, and then go and provide those supports to the school sites. There needs to be more of a connection, or I shouldn't say more because I don't know what the connection is right now, but there needs to be a very seamless connection between when our kids are taking assessment data and supports both at the school site level, but also here centrally, so that we can ensure that all kids are meeting the academic expectations. And that's it. Questions?
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Okay, so earlier you talked about trying to marry our resources with our strategic plan, the fact that we're having money issues, which is, of course, the truth. And in looking at your publications and awards, I see that you've done some work with adequacy studies.
Yes.
In Michigan, we're doing an adequacy study. In fact, we did one, and now we're doing a second one. And in all fairness, there were some problems with the design of the first study. In just short order, can you give us some idea of what you've done with adequacy studies in California?
Absolutely. So I served on the California School Boards Association Adequacy Committee, which I was the one of two or three non-superintendents that were on that committee. I was brought in as a curriculum and instruction expert. And so what we did was we looked at where our current funding is, where our funding needs to be in order to provide an adequate education, and sources through which we could find funds. And the ending report that came out, which I can get you a copy of, really did do a really good job of having us think about funding in a different way. One of the solutions that I appreciated was having us look at, right now in the nation, our government looks at third grade reading scores to determine how many prisons they're going to build. So we're suggesting a flip on that. As opposed to looking at third grade reading scores to determine how many prisons they're going to build, how about we look at third grade reading scores and we determine how many intervention facilities, if necessary, that we need to build for children, the learning centers, et cetera, and put the money there. If we can intervene before they actually get to prison, we can remove some of that prison funding. Right now in California, it's called Prop 47. And in Prop 47, when the funding is funding for prisons, when the funding for the prisons is not used, then we get the excess, and that's what we all look forward to, our Prop 47 funds. But if you think about the rationale behind that, it really is backwards. And so that's part of the work, is looking at all the structures of government that are currently existing with funding and how we can flip them or shift them so that we're looking at funding that is in favor of our students achieving versus preparing for our students once they don't achieve.
Okay, thanks.
Hopefully that was brief enough.
Yeah, all right. So, I think I shared with you that, that after the first interview, there were some questions that the board had, and I think on the feedback sheets from the community, you know, that they're writing back there, you know, and turning them in and about you and the other candidates.
Okay.
So here was one of the main questions that people had. Relocating across the country to Michigan is a big move for you and your family. So people wrote, why is she coming here from California? You know, what's with that? So please share with the board what went into your thinking about your decision to apply for this job and move you and your family across the country. And do you have a transition plan if you should be selected as the next superintendent? And then the other question was, are you coming here to stay, or is this just passing through to some other place? So
Right.
Can you wrap all that up in some kind of an answer?
I sure can. Well, I'll answer the last question first, because as you could, my husband was, or is, I guess he hasn't gone anywhere. He's a military brat. And so moving for him is not a big of a deal. I'm not used to, you know, the movement. And so for me, it's finding a place to raise our children that is like home. And when we were in Delaware, we left Delaware because my sister-in-law became ill. It was literally, I would still be there. I'd still be there in Seaford if it wasn't for her becoming ill. And so what I noticed, my son even told me, my 16-year-old, he said, Mom, you know, people were nice there. People said hello. He's like, I miss people just walking around saying hello. And so for me personally, moving here is a return back to what I see as, you know, for lack of, I hate to sound cliche, but good old American values of being able to walk. I was on Adams Circle, and I was there looking at a house on Wednesday. And when I tell you, every single person, I went and looked at 6 houses, every single person I saw, hey, how you doing? And it was almost like, hi. Like, having that and having my kids grow up in that environment, there's no replacement for. And that's part of why we knew we wanted to come back east, back this way for that. We just didn't know exactly where. And so this, you know, came up, and that's part of why we want to establish our home here. In answer to the question, is this a permanent? This is it. This is it. We're looking at purchasing homes out here. We're looking at ensuring that our kids are able to have their roots here, and they're excited about it. My kids and my family, my husband, they're all very, very excited about being back. My son told me, "You mean I can ride down the street and I don't have to wear my helmet?" I'm like, "No, you have to wear your helmet." But as they happened to see him, motorcycles didn't have to wear their helmet, and that, he didn't want to be a nerd and wear his helmet. But I said, "Well, Mommy wears a helmet, so you need to wear a helmet." But having my kids, a lady walked by. Her name was Renee. Renee and Tika walked by when I was on Adams Circle, and they're just walking by, going to the store, and I just would say, "Hey," and I'm like, "Well, hey." Now I'm getting used to this saying hello to everybody thing, and I said, "Well, how do you like the community?" And she said, "Oh my God, it's wonderful for kids. I just love it here." She's like, "Right now, I don't even know where my kids are." And I thought to myself, for a minute, I went, "Okay, wait a minute." But then after that, I went, "You know what? My parents didn't always know where I was we came in when the street lights came on. They knew I was in the neighborhood. They knew I didn't go, away. But in California, like my neighborhood right now, I couldn't do that. I have to call up, make sure they're there. Okay, make sure, and they're walking across the street. And so I want different for my kids. I want my kids to be raised in an environment like each and every one of you were raised in, where they know people, where they know their neighbors, where they go to school with people. And I know that reunion on Friday for the class of 97 is going to be huge, because there's so many people still here that know each other, where we have to get prepared for reunions. I couldn't even tell you where my reunion is. And so those are things that I want for my kids. The first question was, why?
So you've kind of shared why you want to come here, and that it's not just a whim that
No.
you're bringing your family across. So do you have a plan, a transition plan, if you were to
Yes.
get the position?
So-
when you would come, or?
Yeah. Right now, it's interesting. I texted my boss literally right before I walked in the door. He's like, "I hope you're giving me your 2 weeks as soon as you get out of there." So my plan is to come here as soon as possible. And that would literally be just a matter of the timing of being able to get out here. And because, one, school has already started, and we need to start this leadership journey in order to get to know folks and move this plan forward. The plan right now, my husband is in Bible college, so he finishes his BA in June in Biblical Studies. I'm so excited for him. So he's not going to stay all the way till June. He's planning on, the whole family's planning on moving here in January, December. When I come, I'm going to bring the baby, and who's one. I have 7 kids. 2 of them are in college, and I have 5 at home. And so we have a beautiful blended family. And so with the 5, I'm bringing the baby, and I'm bringing my current Taylor, who's 9. So he and I are going to come, and he's going to get enrolled in school right away. The only reason we're not bringing the 2 younger ones is because right now they're in dual immersion, and so we want them to kind of continue. And also having all 4 here with just me is going to be a bit of a challenge, so we want them to finish out. The plan is for me to either purchase a home. Right now we're getting our financing finalized to purchase within the first 45 days, and I'll probably either rent a room or see if there's one of the houses I'm looking at has a lease purchase. We're going to ask about a lease purchase option, so because it's empty, I can move in, and then we can work out the purchasing until we get to that point. So it's already kind of in the works. It's just dependent upon your decision. So long story short, the plan is for me to come as soon as possible and to bring the younger 2, and we already have someone that has agreed to keep the baby. So that's a good step in the right direction, and then it'll also allow me the freedom to be able to stay for some of the night events and really immerse myself into the community as I would like to.
Okay, so you've satisfied the fact that you're not coming here on a whim.
No,
So, thank
not
you.
a whim at all.
Thank you. All right, so listening involves hearing the speaker and understanding the speaker's point of view. Describe how you do this.
Well, the first thing I do is I tend to listen. I tend to listen with my whole body, which people will say, so I do the nodding, and I try to avoid that at times. But I also paraphrase quite a bit, so you'll hear me say things like, what I heard you say was, okay, so let me see if I summarize this, and I can say what you're saying in my own words. So I try to paraphrase or repeat back what I've heard, especially when it's a conflicting a situation that has any kind of conflict involved, because I really want to hear and understand not only what people are saying, but where they're coming from, why they're saying it, what's the deeper reason behind it. And to be quite honest, it involves not talking. So, I just try to listen and hear out. I'm also one that will pause when it comes to solutions, and sometimes that frustrates people, admittedly, but I don't want to make decisions on a whim. I want to really think and confer with our team. Also, with any situation, especially when you first get here, I need to know the background, and so I can't always just say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And if I do that with every person, I need to then, go to folks that have been here a while and say, okay, this is the situation. This is what's come up. Tell me the history behind this. Tell me what has happened before. That way, one, my staff isn't being undermined, because it's very possible that it could have been something that already came up or one of them has already dealt with, and then they're trying to come to me to, kind of circumvent that. And so listening, pausing, really conferring with my team and coming back.
Okay, so listening, pausing, paraphrasing, okay. Collaborative leaders involve the thinking of others.
Mm-hmm.
Under what circumstances do you, as the leader, just have to make a decision?
It depends on the situation. So when there is an emergency situation, so for example, I know there was a question or a comment around, making the decision around snow days, or if there's a decision around an emergency situation. Right in California, we have to call lockdowns quite a bit. In the areas that when I worked in South Central and places like that, we would have to call a lockdown, or the police would have to respond. So the first situation is when there's an emergency. I typically, when there's police involved or something like that, it depends. Usually I have a really good relationship with our police chief or our sheriff, and so we determine, who's going to take the lead on which situations and who's going to consult. And so that's one where I actually have to make a decision. The other piece is when it involves a family or a child's welfare or safety. So I need to make a decision, and this is just the way that we're going to go. If a deadline for funding or for state needs to be met, then I need to make a decision. If there's conflict and we just cannot come to resolution, where we brought the team together, everybody's had their say, we've had everybody weigh in, and we just can't come to consensus. If it was something that we wanted to make a consensus on, then I need to make a decision. And I think ultimately, if it has to do with something that we as a team, as a board, need to decide on, then, and I can or cannot bring it to a board meeting, then I would either call or confer and need to make the decision. So most times I try to be collaborative, but when a decision has to be made in those emergency situations, I can and will make it, and then we can discuss the rationale, and we can discuss how we got to this place. If it was a decision that didn't have to be made in that way, we can then discuss afterwards how we can avoid that situation in the future. But now this is the decision, and we have to live with it.
Question.
Right.
Dr. Holt, so we talk about being a collaborative leader, but also being an effective leader, you have to have trust. Mm-hmm. Being new to the district, how would you gain that trust?
The first step is by listening and getting to know people and taking the time to truly listen. Something that I know is a challenge is when people do not have the time to truly sit down and have those face-to-face conversations and get to the bottom of why people feel the way they do. And so I believe there's trust built in stories, and stories build relationships. And so having those conversations with people is going to be critical. I think also doing what I say and saying what I do. And what I mean by that is if I said that this is what we're going to, then that is it. And being someone that is of my word. I believe that there's only two things you have in life. You have your name and your word. And we know from history they can take your name, but they cannot take your word from you. And so being a person of my word and a person of integrity means more to me than you know. And so being able to say, and one of the greatest compliments is when people say, yeah, when you talk to Dr. Holt, if she said it, then she meant it. And I think that's what builds trust.
Thank you, Dr. Holt.
I have just a lighthearted question here. Are you talking about making decisions? Are you familiar with the student snow dance?
The snow dance. What do they dress up like snowmen?
Where you throw a couple ice cubes in the commode and you dance around wildly trying to get a snow day.
Chanting. That's chanting snow day, snow day. Yeah.
I have never heard of
Well, you
anything.
will if
People
you get
actually
this
do that?
job.
Oh, yeah.
You have a,
What is this, like a 4 in the morning, like they're praying that you know, they're gonna get that 6
Oh, the
a.m.
night-
call?
night
Everybody
before,
get
before
up
you go to
and do
sleep.
some snow dancing.
Yeah,
something
because you have
like
to wear
that.
your pajamas inside out too, and put a white crayon on the windowsill.
No, there's a lot of,
We'll
a
talk
lot of
later.
lore about snow
Snow
days.
days.
Or you can't find your spoons because they're under your
Well,
kids'
coming
pillows.
from California, you know.
No, but I did have snow days in Delaware, so I am familiar with snow days, but I've never heard of I have to call my Delaware teachers and ask them if they do snow dancing.
So, kind of piggybacking on the last question about collaboration and when you make a decision. So tell us about any training that you've had in conflict management and consensus building.
Okay, goodness, I gotta go back to my resume. It's been so much. So, most recently, I have had training in restorative practices, and I loved it so much that I went to go get trained as a trainer for days 1 and 2 of restorative practices, because it's really about community building, and I've used it with our teams at the district office level. I've seen it done in classrooms. I saw it today. Okay, let me not get excited, but I saw a teacher doing a community building circle day. I almost flipped my lid because that was very exciting, and it's an equitable practice. It's just an amazing practice for our teachers to use with kids. So that's one of the trainings. I have been through unconscious bias training from our California Teachers Association. I've also been through it with Glenn Singleton, Edwin Javius, Jawanza Kunjufu, Shiraki Holly. So doing the unconscious bias and really understanding how to build consensus through conflict and through passionate situations. That's where a lot of my work with dealing with issues of equity, and not always racial equity. With equity, we're talking about equity and like what I see here as a funding equity issue, which is why I'm so passionate about it. But we can have equity in services, we can have equity in supports, we can have, or lack of equity. So building collaboration around those tough topics, I've had training in that. I've done, thinking about it, it's a pink book, not courageous conversations, it's cognitive coaching. So I've done cognitive coaching training. I've been trained in the Superintendent's Academy from ProAct. So within the Superintendent's Academy, you get conflict and collaboration training. And I would have to say the best training was serving as a principal and being in my previous roles in the everyday things that come up and how we had to deal with them. And at our level, we cannot always deal with problems just in a bubble. They have to be dealt with out in with everyone together.
What's your philosophy on special education and gifted education? And how does your philosophy frame your approach to working with instructional staff?
Philosophy. Those are our babies. So I'm a little puzzled. Let me think about that one for a moment. And the reason I'm a little puzzled is because I kind of get where the question is going, but from where my heart is, those are my babies. And when, as a teacher, when, you know, I'll never forget the first day one of our RSP teachers, Ms. Hertzig, came in to grab my babies to take them out for RSP services. And I was like, where are they going? No. And so my babies never left for you're going to come here, and we're going to, I didn't understand what that was, because when I started teaching, I came from charter school. And at charter school, we don't have anyone that comes in and, well, the charter that I was at, we didn't have anyone to do that. I taught my kids, and regardless of what level they came in at, I was responsible for everyone for those hours, the hours that I had them in the classroom. So in my eyes, when I see that pull-out method, or when I see our special education children kind of secluded in the back of, wherever, it's an area of concern for me. It's actually a passion of mine, especially being both gifted and special education. There is an inequity oftentimes in how we think about and treat our gifted students versus our special education students. They're both technically special groups, but one we tend to look at with a certain kind of eye, and the other we look at everybody wants their child to be gifted. I haven't met one parent that said, yes, please, make my child. No, nobody does that. And so what I think is that all of our children are part of our general education program, and it's a service that's provided to enhance their learning and differentiate for them. And so that service sometimes can be provided in the general education classroom. At times, like the classroom we were in today, we were in an adaptive PE, or it looked like an adaptive PE class at Wayne Memorial, and we were talking about some of the challenges some of our kids had, and we know that based on those challenges and the needs of the children in that classroom, they needed an environment where it was a 1-to-1 adult ratio, and in order to meet the learning that they needed at their level. But any time that learning can occur in the general education classroom, that is where it needs to happen, and then we can specialize. And so for a time, I did feel, I'll be honest with you, I felt some kind of way around our gifted students being pulled out. Because when we pull our gifted students out, oftentimes they're not exposed to thinking that maybe, to understanding what it is when people struggle. And so I'll speak about my son in particular. My son is gifted. But when he got to high school, actually it was more like 8th grade, almost high school, he started to struggle. It started to get hard. And my baby almost had a nervous breakdown. I had to act, and I have no shame in saying I had to actually put him in therapy because he did not know how to struggle. So here is this brilliant young man who finally got to a place where he was being challenged, and because he had never been challenged in his 13, 14 years on earth, in his mind, he was going through, I'm a failure, I can't do it. I'm like, whoa. What's going on here? So we need to think about, and it doesn't mean that we need to get rid, I'm not saying get rid of our tag programs. Let me be very, very, very clear. No one is saying that. But we need to be conscious of exposing our children to different learning styles and different types of learning. Because when they get into the work environment, they're going to come across children that learn very quickly and very easily, just like they do. And they're going to come across children or people who may not get things in the same way or speed that they get them. And that's part of social skills, is teaching them how to work with a diverse learning population of learners. And so it falls on both ends. So that's my philosophy on.
Okay. What does the research tell you about technology in the classroom?
Let's see if I brought my. I'm gonna pull out this sheet because this is what I use when I talk with administrators or teachers around technology in the classroom. And so the sheet that this talks about how we use technology. I know you probably can't see it. I can definitely pass it around for you to see. But it's a model that talks about shifting, and we talk about it a little bit here in the strategic plan, how we use technology from substitution all the way to redefinition. And so understanding that if we just get the Chromebooks, which I saw in quite a few of our schools, and all we do is now, instead of reading and highlighting in, the Hamlet book, now they're reading and highlighting on the Chromebook. That's just substitution. You substituted a paper copy for a computer copy. There is absolutely no reason to spend any money on technology for substitution if all we're going to do is the same things that they could have done with a book. The next stage of that is augmentation, which is where it acts as a tool. And so if they're using some of the functions within there, so let's say they're reading a book and they're using the dictionary tool, they're using the thesaurus tool. Well, could they have done that without the Chromebook? Yeah, but it wouldn't have been within the 21st century skills that they need to build. Because these days, unless you're, just Shelley Holt, you probably don't have a thesaurus or a dictionary sitting next to you. Our kids have to, now it's a skill where we have to go back and teach them how to use a thesaurus and use the guide words. And, it's just not something our kids do. They're like, what is this? Oh, I just click on it on the computer. But so what the research says is that when we're just using it for augmentation, again, you're not going to get a significant increase in skills. You're also not going to get a significant increase in learning, and you're not going to build critical thinking. Where you start to build critical thinking is in the modification and redefinition. So when I'm modifying it, so instead of kids doing a summary on their, try to think of an activity the kids would do. Let's say typically the kids would read a story and write, a 2-page summary highlighting the actions of the protagonist, something along those lines. Well, instead of that, let's say that the kids all come together and they now create a Vimeo or with, all those little tools and trinkets that the kids have with it at their use, and they're creating something using the same skills. So now I want you to create an entire storyline or a video around the actions of the protagonist. Now we're starting to modify. We're starting to get kids to think, okay, this is the text that I used. Now I need to use that information and use my technology to modify it and create something new. So that's just modifying, the same assignment, but now they're performing in a different way. What this does is it allows our special education kids, our gifted and talented kids who may not think traditionally, or some of our kids who struggle with writing, and I'm not saying they don't need to do the writing, but they don't need to write it to show me they're thinking. If the focus is for them to show me what they're thinking, why couldn't they use another form of technology to show me that? Then I'll work on the writing skills at a different time. This is where your DNF students that are just sitting there going, oh, well, I'm totally disconnected, go, hey, I could make a song, right? Like, yes, you can, baby, make me a song. Show me what, Hamlet was thinking when, he found out that his mother poisoned, or somebody, I forget who poisoned, somebody poisoned him. The daddy. So I think it was mama that poisoned, mama poisoned the daddy, something like that. But, our kids can write a song. Next thing you know, you have Jay-Z lyrics combined with Eminem lyrics, and you got that DNF kid is now engaged in the learning. That would be modification. The last part is redefinition. This is when our kids are now reading Hamlet, and they're connecting with kids in China who are also reading Hamlet and hearing their perspective on the protagonist, because now they have a Skype or I don't know what all the little technology things, but I know they can talk to people in other countries. I know that one time my babies at Beach Elementary were talking to the NASA space shuttle while it was in space. Whoa. I mean, that's something I never would have thought possible. I remember watching the Challenger go up. It would have been nice to talk to them and say, hey, how you doing? Well, maybe not.
All right, I think
Now
you
that I think
answered
about
that
it.
question.
But
Okay.
you get where I'm going.
All right,
I
we
start
get
talking
it.
about instruction, I get excited. So.
All right, so here you get to talk about it another time, okay?
All right.
So, tell us how you've used your knowledge of student learning and educational research to guide professional development.
Okay. So I have to say that one of the biggest challenges that I know, and also some of my friends who have been in this position know about me, is one of my biggest challenges is that I love doing professional development. I'm pretty good at it, and it's going to be a challenge for me to kind of step out of that role and only step into it when it's absolutely necessary. And so the way that I use research is, one, it always starts with the data. And I'm not just talking about the data, the achievement data. When we're walking classrooms and we're hearing what teachers are struggling with, or we're seeing the different trends that are happening within the nation, that is all data as well. So you start from there. Right now, one thing that our schools are all working on, at least the 6 that I visited, is climate and culture, social-emotional supports, positive behavior supports, Leader in Me, all of the social-emotional aspects of the work and the climate and their climate and culture on campuses, possibly because that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing the first few weeks of school, but also knowing that our teachers and our administrators may or may not get some of the intricacies behind it. So taking what they're doing, looking at the research behind it and presenting information in such a way that it makes people think. I will not often tell people what to do, but I will give you information to make you think, and then I get excited to see what you bring back, because that's, to me, what a leader does. If I just went around telling everybody what to do, then it's kind of pointless. That's too much work. So I'd rather show people a different way to think based on the research and what they're currently going through, allow them to process it with their team back at the school site or even centrally with a thought partner, and seeing how they come back with that information. A great example of that is recently we've been doing some trainings on PBIS and restorative practices, and how that, putting that together in a way that enhances climate and culture. So we had some trainings come in from the county. We had some trainings that we did internally with restorative practices. And one of our school sites, he had the most amazing community building circle with his entire staff. He literally took what he learned from PBIS, what he learned from restorative practices, put it together in a way that made sense for him, and had a community building circle with his teachers to build relationships. And he had teachers that worked across the hall from each other for years that had never spoken to one another, not in a bad way, they just had never gotten to know one another. So that's an example of you taking something that was intended actually for kids, but having an administrator now use that with their staff. And so that's kind of how I do the professional development.
So the next question is, you sort of touched on it a couple of times. In the strategic plan, it speaks to the importance of social, emotional, and behavioral needs of students and families.
Yes.
What has been your experience in this area, and how would you help the district implement the work?
So I'll try not to repeat anything, but my experience in this area has been extensive, particularly the last 2.5 years. But I can also speak to, as a principal, And as a teacher, one of the things I focused on was building relationships in the classroom, building relationships amongst the staff. Every school I'd ever come to, every classroom I had ever taught, there was not a significant relationship amongst the people when we got there. And building in practices to have that happen is part of how we got some of those gains within those first few years. Because once you have a relationship, with a relationship comes vulnerability. And so if you and I have a relationship, I can be vulnerable and say, okay, now I really don't know how to do that, but you're really good at it. Can you show me? And you're more apt to say, sure, why not? Versus if we don't have a relationship, I know you're really good at it, but now I'm just going to turn my back because you're so good, and now you're making me look bad. And so with those significant, with that relationship and building climate and culture, what we have to do is really hone in on that and to channel what we're doing. What I found at many school sites is, not here, but in general, is they'll have quite a few different programs for climate and culture, but they don't know how they all go together. And so that's part of creating that seamless. It's not just taking out all the different programs, like let's get rid of this one, let's get rid of this one, we're just going to choose one program. It's figuring out, how do I take the best parts of this, the best parts of this, the best parts of this over here to accomplish what we're doing. And that's the real work of climate and culture. It's how do I balance the socio-emotional with, kids that may have emotional disturbance, they may be suffering from trauma, they may have very high adverse childhood experience scores. So, and there is data that predicts from a child's traumatic experience to how they'll do in adulthood and life expectancy. Those of us with higher ACEs scores are actually going to die sooner. And I don't know about you guys, but I want to live here as long as possible. Right here in Wayne Westland, that is. So just to be very clear. So in using that information, we can now determine what our next steps are at the school site to build on that social-emotional curriculum and build on the things that are there. One more piece that I can definitely bring is an understanding of how, like I said, how they all fit. What I noticed at the school sites is we have PBIS Leader and Me. PBIS is an external fix. It's a structural piece. It talks about expectations. It talks about how we're going to act in the hallway, how we're going to act in the classroom, how we're going to pass out papers. And it also and sometimes people get real focused on the rewards and consequences because they think it's just a token system. But really it's about setting the structure and the expectations for how we're going to behave and act and operate. What Leader and Me, restorative practices, they're more inside out. They talk about why it is important. The reason why I'm not going to run in the hallway is because I know I might trip and I might hurt someone. And if I hurt someone, then I'm going to be hurt. So the Leader and Me and those other programs help bring out that internal empathy piece. With the structure and the empathy, that's where you're going to get good climate and quality climate and culture. But if we don't understand how those fit together, it can be very easy to let go of some critical pieces.
Okay. So you've looked at the strategic plan and you've talked to different folks.
Yes, ma'am.
And you know that the Wayne Westland demographics are shifting a bit.
Yes,
have
ma'am.
been shifting. And the enrollment has been declining.
Yes.
So what are some specific strategies that you might use to reverse the trend of declining enrollment? And what's been your experience in working with transient students?
Okay, I'll start with the second one because it was the last question. At the highest transiency school I worked at was Fruit Ridge Elementary, and at the time I was there, for the entire year, it was, I want to say it was either 57 or 75. I get the numbers mixed up, but it was high. It was the highest transiency rate in the district. And so the kids I started out with at the beginning of the year were not the same kids that I had literally towards the end of the year. And so we have to make sure, and when our kids are that transient, we have to make sure that our expectations around at the school sites and our climate and culture is more than on point. Because when our kids come in, many times they're coming from either unstructured environments, they're coming from a different structure, or they may have some emotional baggage that they're bringing with them. We have to be that sustaining or that structural force when we're dealing with our transient youth. I think also our social-emotional supports have to be in place. So that's where our social workers, our reflection rooms really come into play. And that I see that right now as a strength based on the sites that I've seen. I see it as a strength because people know it has to be done, and it's an area of growth because it's something that we can still do a little bit more strategically to get a better result across the board. Right now, what I saw was a lot of one-off, support for socio-emotional as opposed to a very systemic approach to that work. And so the first part of the question was around
Have any strategies for helping reverse
the declining enrollment. So I think the biggest piece is celebrating our successes. As I was out at the school sites, what I saw, what I've learned on the website, and what I learned about Wayne Westland, even hearing in the community, versus what I saw at the school sites was a mismatch. We are not celebrating all of the great things that are happening in our school district by far. And I don't mean that as a critique. I mean that as, this is amazing. We have a lot of great things that we can now figure out a way to strategically celebrate. And so that would be one of my biggest goals, is to figure out what is our marketing and advertisement campaign. What are our 30-second or 60-second elevator speeches that everybody has when someone says something positive about Wayne Westland? What is our 30 or 60-second elevator speech when someone says a challenge about Wayne Westland? And is it universal across the board that everybody knows that it's everyone's responsibility to promote the positive things that are happening in our district? That's one. So creating a marketing campaign to celebrate some of the great things that are happening. A second thing is to really look at how we can market our community as one where people will come. I understand the piece about that I read about, and Ms. Ball expounded upon earlier today, that the birth rates have decreased. So literally, we just don't have the kids. It's not that we have about 1,500 kids that aren't coming to our district, but overall, people are not having the number of kids that they used to have. I see it a bit differently. I see it as there are going to be so many families that are going to be looking at areas right outside of Detroit, right outside of Ann Arbor, the downtown areas, that are going to be looking for what I'm looking for and the reason I'm here, for a neighborhood where I don't have to worry, about walking my kids across the street. And so how can we market that, and market that we have houses that you can actually purchase? I was working with my realtor, and he was, well, I don't qualify for some of them. He was talking to a young lady on the street about, that I happened to start talking to, about all the different programs for her to buy her first home. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, now what if we had a connection with the Realtors Association? So as opposed to everybody looking at our scores right now and going, oh, okay, well, I'd rather go to Canton, or I might be saying that wrong, Canton, sorry. But I might want to go to Canton or somewhere, or Romulus, or another place. Why can't we work with our realtors to say, well, actually, you can purchase a home here, you can get it for, he said, no down payment home. Whoa, do you know what that would do for people that it may not be as attractive to you guys here, but coming from California, all I've been doing is talking to people about, you guys need to come out here too. I have about at least 4 friends that are really seriously considering moving out here, because we have affordable housing in great communities and people who are fabulous. We need to market that. And it may not be marketing just here, but as the MGM piece comes in to Detroit, as they build that hockey a stadium, as that train or whatever it's going to be, the railway that's going to connect Detroit and Ann Arbor comes in, it's going to go right through Wayne. We need to be at the table at some of these meetings in Detroit and at the city and the state level to say, we want Wayne Westland to be the place that people want to come. That's part of what I see as my role as superintendent, and our role as a board, is getting at the table to have those conversations. So it's not just about increasing people that are already here, it's about attracting people back here to make Wayne Westland what we know it can and should be.
Okay. Asking the community to support a bond issue is part of the strategic thinking of the district.
Mm-hmm.
What role have you played in passing a funding initiative in the past, and how might you approach it if you were the superintendent?
Like I was saying last interview, I had one experience with it, and my superintendent at the time, honestly, he blessed me with the opportunity to run the process, and right alongside him. He had done it. He had been a superintendent 29 years in the same district, and honestly, that's what I'm looking to do, is to be somewhere as long as because he was able to just pull it out of the side of his, it was just, it came to him so quick. But he allowed me to work side by side, and he taught me all of the, I don't want to say tricks because it's not really tricks, but the strategies around working with people. So one of the ways I would approach it here is already, I know Jim has already put out some things around meeting in September with our community to start educating them about why we need the bond. We don't need to sell the bond, we need to sell the plan. We need to sell the dream. And because if we sell the bond, people will just hear us asking for money. If we sell the dream that we have in this plan, people see the future and they see what they're investing in. So I think part of our goal in that marketing campaign is twofold. One, to market Wayne Westland, but also to sell the dream of what we're looking at doing and to invite them to become part of it with us. And so as we did the community forums, this was back in Delaware, as we did those community forums and people got to know who I was, they already knew the superintendent because he had been there many years, but once again, I was an unknown factor. They just, who is this lady, and what is she talking about? But as they got to know me and know how I operated, that's when they went, oh, okay. And they saw everything that they were saying was considered. It wasn't all in the plan, but when the community came out and they voiced their challenges, I addressed them. I had conversations with them. There was a whole lot of Starbucks involved, and just and hearing and listening to what it is that people were thinking. And then I would bring the plans out and say, okay, well, what about this? What about this? And they were comfortable kind of going back and forth. So I think with the bond issue, it's going to be one, selling the plan. And once people, and the dream, once people really get behind that and are fully for it, I haven't met one person, no matter if they love the school district or not, I haven't met one person who isn't vested in Wayne Westland. Everybody I talk to, and I've talked to quite a few actually, have talked about how much they love this place. People will put their money where their mouth is, but they have to believe in us as we move this forward. So I think building those relationships with us as a board, helping our entire staff be the ones to steward that, bringing in having our union representatives right here next to us as we're moving this forward, then it becomes a community effort. One of the great things about this not being like a huge district like Chicago or LA is that it is political, but it's not. It's more emotional, and we have to hit that emotional side.
Can you give an example of when you've developed business partnerships that supported student success?
Absolutely. One of the best ones I can speak to right now is the partnership that we have with I have two right now. I'm developing a partnership with one of our universities because I don't have social workers on my campuses, and that's a problem. But you know what universities have are interns, and you know what interns are? Free. So I had to figure out a free way to get my babies some of the supports that they needed on the campus. And so I will say I didn't initiate it. My boss actually initiated it, but I saw it through once he made the initial call of setting up a program for to create an intern program in our district. It did not exist. And there's a lot of parameters that you have to meet in order for interns to get their units. So creating us a document or creating a plan, it wasn't just a document, it was actually an implementation plan where we knew exactly what the students were going to be doing while they were with us, and it served them, and it also served my students. So they got one-on-one counseling experience, they got group counseling experience, they got experience doing IEPs and truly understanding their role in special ed, which is not to just get more special ed kids, but to actually provide services and interventions and supports so that we actually decrease the number of kids that are in special ed, but we can always increase the amount of services that children are receiving that don't have to be special ed. In California right now, at least in our district, kids can't get mental health services unless they're identified special education. And so we had to shift that and be able to provide mental health services just because a young man or a young lady's grandma died or was taken by ICE does not mean that they need to be identified special ed. It means they need counseling and support, and they may even need therapy. It may be to that level, but we shouldn't have to identify them in order to do it. So building those partnerships so our kids could get those services is part of what we built, and we're still building. It's actually in its final stages, so I'm actually looking forward to, I know even if I come here, it's going to still move forward, and I'm very confident in that. And I've also built partnerships with South Coast, which is another organization that they send facilitators to our campuses to conduct groups because our counselors could not conduct enough groups that the kids need. So I have anxiety groups, especially with my gifted and talented kids. Around February, March, my anxiety group count goes through the roof, right before AP testing, et cetera. So we have to bring down that affective filter for a lot of our gifted and talented kids because we kept seeing them coming in for home instruction. It's like, you don't need home instruction, baby. You just need someone to talk you through what you're going through. And as we started to implement that with those groups and they could see, oh, I'm not crazy, I'm not abnormal, everybody's going through it and just not talking about it, yes. So those are some of the partnerships I've
Okay.
connected.
Can you describe roles you have played in the formation of education policy at the local, state, or national level?
Oh, wow, yeah. One of the people that I literally have admired since I was a little girl is Maxine Waters. I remember I used to watch Maxine Waters and just be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she said that. There were so many times that I would say that. And what she did, probably unbeknownst to her, is she gave me the courage to speak up for the voiceless. And so that's part of what I've always done in my career, is speak up for the voiceless. And so I have been a part, like I mentioned, with the Adequacy Committee. That's something that we continue to do, is the adequacy work and forming legislation around that. I have served as on AXA, which is our Association of California School Administrators, on the AXA board, and on the statewide board and within our local district. And on the AXA board, we help formulate legislation at the state and the federal level, particularly in the areas of school discipline. So moving away from zero tolerance and and formulating and getting rid of right now. I'm trying to figure out a way to speak about it in California, not in California terms. We have case suspensions, 48900K, which is part of our ed code. Case suspension, that's the defiance, disruption, disrespectful, that one suspension that everybody just puts everything in. So we have legislation now that you cannot suspend for defiance, disruption, and disrespect at kindergarten through third grade level. You can also not expel solely for case suspensions, and I was part of that, the teams that worked on that, showing how even one suspension increases a student's chance of going into the school to prison pipeline by 40%. 40%, one suspension. And so when we use that data and we show the impact of suspension and how it negatively impacts student achievement, we were able to get some legislation passed.
So you worked at the state level?
At the state level, at the local level, I've worked at the district level. I don't stay quiet, unfortunately, with that, around that.
So I want you to reflect now on a situation. I want you to bring up a situation in your memory, a complex situation sometime in this job or some other job where you really weren't able to handle it effectively. In reflection of this situation, describe it, and then what happened and what might you have done differently?
I know which one. Okay. So, and yes, this is a situation that did not work, like you're asking for. There was a situation where there were colleagues, because some of them reported to me, but then they didn't. There were colleagues that were struggling with the skill set to be able to do the work that was being asked of them. And in the midst of it, there were actions that they took that were, I'm trying to say it without saying exactly what it is because it's on tape and I don't want to violate anyone's, but I knew there were problems brewing, and I did not address the problems that were brewing. In my mind, I figured it was just going to blow over and that folks were going to be okay. And it didn't. It didn't blow over. The situation actually ended up getting worse, and it resulted in some very hard feelings, some very difficult work environments, and actually colleagues that literally could not work with one another, and a few people actually quit as a result of it. And as one of the supervisors in this role, and I know what I could have done was start to bring small groups of people together and started to interject. But what I actually did was I kind of backed out of it and was like, well, it's not really part of me, and I didn't say anything and I didn't do anything. And to this day, I still regret that because I probably could have gone back and started to bridge some of those relationships with folks, but I didn't. And that's part of the reason that I'm so passionate about relationships now, because I see that without the relationships, it can actually tear down and tear apart good people who want to do great things for kids. And each and every one of these people are great when it comes to wanting to do what's right for kids. I mean, there was nothing wrong, except that there was some intermingling and some problems within them. And I could have, shifted it, but I didn't. And so in hindsight, what I would have done is to start bringing people together and bringing those conversations to the table. But at the time, I just honestly didn't have the skill set. This was a few years back, and it's part of what spurred me to want to gain the skill set to be able to tackle some of those issues. And honestly, I was uncomfortable dealing with some of the issues because some of them had to do with race, some had, and I was like, well, I don't want to jump into that can of worms, but I should have. I really, really should have, because it would have turned out differently for kids if I did. Hope I wasn't too vague.
No, okay. All right, so that's the last official question that we have for you. Board, do you have, as you've been listening to
Anything you wanna
Dr.
know?
Holt, is there anything that she
Anything
hasn't
else?
shared that you need to ask her about, that we didn't ask her about in our questions? Nothing?
My favorite color is purple.
Checking you out.
No, right?
Shelley, then, the board doesn't have any final questions for you, but what would you like to say to them in summation here?
In summation, I want to reiterate, because if I were anybody in this room, I've tried to put myself in your position and thinking of where you're coming from. And after speaking with Dr. Harmala, oh my gosh, she's amazing. I mean, she's absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed talking to her. I think we have very similar philosophies. And I would really want to know if someone was ready and willing to come to Wayne Westland and stay and actually do the work. And like I said earlier, all I have in this world is my name and my word. And my word is telling you this is where we want to be. My husband and I are very excited to come here and literally not only start, but retire here. That's, my husband's almost 50. So he's, looking at, all right, we're looking at where we're going to spend our golden years. And, this is where we want to be. The other piece is, because folks are wondering, oh, she's coming out here, there's no family. My husband's from Buffalo, New York. And so for the first time in his life since he's been born, he'll be able, his grandmother is turning 100 on Saturday. He'll be able to, about 4 hours from Buffalo. We're only a few hours from our family in Delaware. We can now drive down to Atlanta. And you know what? It's only $150 round trip if you get the ticket early, to go real early, to go back to California. And so for us and my family, my mother, my father is gone to be with the Lord, but my mother is in Texas. My husband's father is still in California, but he goes to Buffalo all the time. So we actually need to get closer to this side of the coast, because this is where all of his family is. And he's been doing this with me for quite a few years now, all these kids, and it's about time for him to be able to spend his years out here. So please know that I am committed. I'm excited and eager to begin and to begin our relationships. And I would not be here if I didn't think it was a fit. I have actually turned down interviews, so it's not something that I just do on a whim. I really believe this will be a fit, and I think with me and I know John is my counterpart in this process, but with both of us together and our amazing cabinet that I've been able to meet, I think we can do great things for not only this district, but this city and the future of our kids. And I want my great future to start here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holt.
And if I don't see you guys again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Marlene, we're going to take a 5.